Hey Cloud Gamers, today we're looking at Grand Theft Auto 5 across several of the cloud gaming platforms. This is one that's been highly requested amongst our community members. So starting off with the story gameplay here fairly early on. Got Shadow PC on the left, Maximum Settings GTX 1080 in the middle, and Gamenube's P4000 on the right. You can see straight away looking at the figures, the GPU is pretty much maxed out across the board, but the CPU is bouncing around here, with maximum settings CPU staying the lowest, and the shadow probably looking at the highest here, with Gamenube still sitting kind of somewhere in the middle. RAM wise, Gamenube seems to be eating up the most RAM, but for frames per second, Maximum Settings GTX 1080 seems to be the lead here. As we look at a still frame here as the guy comes in the door, it's looking pretty even across the board. If anything, Shadow and Maximum Settings are looking just a little bit better. But considering the Gamenube rig has a lesser GPU, it does look pretty good. As we have the side-by-side here, they are looking pretty close across the board. All three are using 1920 by 1080 with quite high settings, which we'll go into on the benchmark a little bit later. And as we can see on the gameplay here, the frames per second are staying above 50 across the board, even with Gamenube, with Shadow and Maximum Settings 1080 rigs holding over 70. As we go into a bit of individual Shadow PC play here, we can see those frames per second even as we're whizzing around the corners here, staying around the 70 plus mark. Even with the crashes there, the car is looking very crisp and clean. The distance work is popping in a little bit, but that's to be expected. As we move over to Maximum Settings 1080, we're looking at very little difference. The frames per second staying a little bit higher, but not really much in it, as we see a dip there into the 60s, so very close between Shadow PC and the GTX 1080, as to be expected. And again, we're seeing that pop in as well. If anything, maybe the Maximum Settings 1080 looking a little bit sharper there. As we go to Gamenube, you can see those frames dropping down to the 50s. The same graphics pop as we come over the hill, but overall, all looking very similar. And even though I wasn't trying it, I seem to have been pretty consistent with my crash on that intersection. But considering Gamenube is the lesser rig here, even as we go back into the side-by-side, it's looking pretty close across the board. And this will be down to a preference of availability and cost. So we're going to move into the benchmark provided by Grand Theft Auto 5. Unfortunately, the afterburner didn't kick in for me on Gamenube, but you can see the frames per second consistently being far lower there on the bottom. Now, something I did notice that was a bit odd is I originally synced up this benchmark all at the start. And you can see there that it suddenly got out of sync with Shadow PC coming in first, Gamenube second, and Maximum Settings third. So although I synced this back up, I did see consistent results again as we transferred between scenes. So this would lead me to believe that the Maximum Settings 1080 storage, as it is on the second drive, is definitely quite a bit slower than that of the Shadow PC and even Gamenube. So what Shadow PC is lacking in the CPU department, it does seem to be making up for in the hard drive or the SSD. You can see with Maximum Settings installed on the secondary drive that it is quite a bit slower there. But as we come into the final part of the benchmark with a freeze frame of the jet, you can see that the picture quality of Maximum Settings and Shadow PC is extremely crisp and clear, and Gamenube not being far behind there at all. So whatever you want to play on, even if you're using those really high settings with anti-aliasing and tessellation etc. turned on, it is playable across all 3 rigs quite happily, with maximum settings and Shadow PC giving you those slightly higher frames per second. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Cloud Gaming Extreme for all of the latest across all cloud gaming platforms, and I will see you next time.